Josh Kosman from the Capital Forum, and as part of our interview series, we're interviewing Jonathan Edelman from Kaplan. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to be with you.
Your firm and you do a lot of work with class actions, a lot of really interesting cases. How do you see the landscape changing as far as class actions?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because class actions work on a really long time frame. I work on probably 6 or 7 different cases, and I think over half of them have been going on for over 10 years, and at least a couple are approaching the 20-year mark. So, the work that the class action timeline, because it's so long, things change very slowly. Case law changes slowly. The administration, while it has expresses different priorities, we don't tend to see the results of how the administration changes until far down the road, because for example, the Biden administration put a much more emphasis on labor antitrust and started to do a little bit more toward the end of trying to identify cartels and beef up cartel enforcement. But we tend not to actually find those cartels. Once a cartel is found, it is still going to take quite a long time for all of that information to filter through our process. And so what we're seeing now is, I think, kind of a general shrinking of what courts are willing to accept in terms of motions to dismiss and pleading standards, as well as on summary judgment, just a general shrinking of the types of cases that are actually going through to trial. But that's not necessarily something that's over the past couple of years. It's just kind of a long process starting from really the 90s of narrowing of antitrust laws, which affect class actions because everything affects class actions.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what kind of new cases are you looking for, considering that the funnel is narrowing?
Yeah, exactly. So for us, we still look for cartel cases. Those are often very dependent on administrative and regulatory investigation, because we don't have either the resources or the subpoena power that governments do. And so we've seen those really dry up over the past 10, 15 years. We're excited for the new initiative that was announced via the Postal Service to try and incentivize antitrust whistleblowers to come forward with actual monetary benefits. And we're hoping that will actually lead to more investigations and uncovering of cartel activity. But we haven't found so much yet. Now we're focused, we've done a lot more recently on monopolization cases. One of the cases I have worked on recently is against Fanatics, a large, generally known as an apparel producer, as well as the main leagues, sports leagues, and players associations for those leagues. So the big three in the U.S. are the NFL, the NBA basketball, and the MLB, Major League Baseball, and all of their associated players associations. We allege that Fanatics signed exclusive deals with each of those leagues and players associations in 4 of those 6 contracts for 20 years. For 2 of those contracts, the basketball contracts, for 10 years. And because they signed exclusive licenses, they are now the only ones who can produce cards, trading cards that have a player's name and likeness and the team logo and the NFL, NBA, the league logo on that. So we've sent out a complaint, or we've alleged that those licenses and some other related conduct is anti-competitive. But those are more the types of cases that we've been bringing recently.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, Fanatics bought Topps a few years ago, kind of taking them from, I think it was Madison Dearborn Partners, if I remember right, but kind of taking it out from under them getting those exclusive contracts with the leagues, and therefore making it impossible for Topps to make much money. So they got to buy Topps at a cheap price, if I remember right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, they signed the contracts with the leagues actually before they entered the market at all. So they signed them in 2021, the leagues and the Players Associates in 2021. And then once Topps realized that Topps at that point was still producing MLB cards and I collected cards when I was a kid. I don't know if you
I
did as
did.
well,
I did.
but that's really the only main card producer that still from my time that still exists. Fleer is gone. Upper Deck only produces ice hockey cards. And so Topps was the legacy provider, and Fanatics basically scooped out from under them all of the main and largest trading card licenses that they needed, and so they were able to buy them at a bargain basement price.
So what about that case? Fanatics is dominant in sports apparel, dominant in sports trading cards, exclusive relationship with the big four sports leagues. Why did that case jump out at you guys that you looked at it and said, yes, that's a good monopolization case?
Yeah, there were a few things that jumped out. First is just the length of the licenses. Exclusive licenses occupy a bit of a gray area in antitrust law. They're generally allowed as long as they're short term. ZF Meritor is, I think, one of the main cases that we look to. But then you start to see, I think you've seen companies, because they've been more able to, they've passed antitrust scrutiny more. You've seen them start to get longer and longer and longer. And so 5-year license is a lot. 10 years is even more than that, and certainly raises red flags. But a 20-year exclusive license is quite a lot. So I think that, combined with the idea that they were buying all of these licenses, right? We believe that the MLB, NBA, and NFL trading cards are, when you combine them, probably upwards of 80-90% of the entire market of trading cards, of at least sports trading cards in the country. And so that also jumps out as a lot. One producer that's locked up production for that large of the market.
And you're representing the indirect benefit, the people who buy trading cards.
That's right. Yeah. So this case, there's a class action with direct purchasers and a separate class action for indirect purchasers. And so we, because we have significant experience in our firm, we represented indirect purchasers in the auto parts, the large auto parts case that was going on for a lot of the 2010s. We represent folks who bought cards from either card shops or big box stores, say your Targets and Walmarts, because so few people actually buy cards directly from Fanatics.com or Topps.com or the leagues themselves.
And Jonathan, your firm got an incredible win suing the auto parts industry for indirect purchasers, $1.2 billion, took more than a decade. Why was that case successful, and what did your firm learn from that?
Yeah. So that case, I do have to admit that the start of that case predates both my time at the firm and I think when I started law school and maybe even undergrad. Speaking of these long cases that have a very long time horizon. But in working on the case, a couple things stand out. One is the start of the government investigation that led to certain defendants actually being able to come forward, sign deals, and cooperate. And that just leads to a lot more information that we can get, figuring out which defendants were actually in this cartel, how big this actually went, and how the pricing decisions were able to shed light on what the damages to the class actually were. So that's one part of it, and I think the second part is just the ability to represent indirect purchasers, because most people, or everyone in this instance, bought these auto parts. The consumers bought them on cars. No one is buying tires. Well, tires is maybe different, but a brake light or something
Right.
like that themselves. And so being able to have, I think, sued under 30 different state laws to get around the Illinois BRIC decision that prohibits damages recovery for direct purchaser or for indirect purchasers under federal law. To be able to sue under state law on, I think it was about 30 different states, their antitrust statutes that do allow for indirect purchaser recovery, I think was really able to allow us to represent a class that had a lot of harm but was not going to be able to get it redressed within the federal system of law.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate the time, Jonathan.
All right. Thanks so much.